When my sister missed her flight, my parents paid $6,500 for a new first-class ticket without hesitating. When my heating system died in the middle of winter, Dad said, "Your problems aren't our responsibility." So I handled it. 4 months later, they saw the cabin I bought in the mountains. My sister smiled and asked, "Can we stay here this weekend?" I looked at her and said, "Not my responsibility." The furnace quit at 2 in the morning on a Sunday in January. Not a slow fade, not a rattle and a cough. One moment the baseboard registers were pushing warm air through the hallway, and the next the house dropped into a silence so total it pulled me out of sleep like a hand on my collar. The temperature outside was 19 degrees. By 3:15, my breath was visible against the bedroom ceiling, and the pipes were ticking in the walls the way they do when they start thinking about freezing. I pulled on a coat, went to the basement, and opened the access panel on the unit. The heat exchanger had cracked clean across the firebox. I have been a licensed general contractor for 9 years. I own Harlow Built LLC, a residential and mountain construction firm based outside Asheville, North Carolina. Last year, the company cleared $380,000 in gross revenue. I knew what that crack meant. Somewhere around $3,800, parts and labor, if my fax subcontractor could get to it within the week. That morning, I called my father, not because I could not afford the repair. The money was not the issue. The issue was a memory that had been sitting in my chest since November, hard and specific, and the furnace finally gave it enough weight to speak. 2 months earlier, my younger sister Gemma had missed her flight to a friend's destination wedding in Cabo, San Lucas. She had been booked in economy. She called our mother Corinne from the airport lounge crying, said the seats were too small, said she was anxious, said she could not face a 5-hour flight in coach. My parents did not hesitate, not for 1 minute. My mother read a credit card number over the phone while my father Ryland sat beside her on the living room couch nodding along. $6,500 for a same-day first-class ticket on a different airline. Gemma flew in a lie-flat seat and slept the whole way to Cabo. Nobody in my family seemed to think this was unusual. Nobody mentioned it to me until Thanksgiving, when Gemma brought it up over turkey the way you mention a parking spot you got lucky with. So when my furnace cracked in the coldest week of the year, when the pipes were threatening and the house was going dark with cold, I thought maybe this was the time they showed up for me the way they showed up for her. Maybe this once. My father answered on the 4th ring. I told him what happened. Cracked heat exchanger, 19 degrees, repair estimate around $3,800. I was not asking him to pay for it. I was asking if they could help. There was a pause. The kind of pause where you can hear someone deciding what you are worth. Then Ryland Harlow, 62 years old, retired warehouse supervisor, a man whose mortgage I had been paying for 3 years, said, "Teague, your problems are not our responsibility. You are a grown man. Handle it." He hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the dial tone hum against my ear until it turned into that 3-note signal. That means nobody is coming. On my workbench in the next room, my grandfather, Emmett's brass plumb bob, sat on a square of felt beside a carpenter's pencil and a spirit level. Grandpa Emmett gave me that tool when I was 14 years old. He pressed it into my palm, closed my fingers around the cold brass, and said, "When everything looks straight, hang the line. It will tell you what's crooked." I almost called my father back that night. My thumb was on the redial button, the screen still warm. But I looked through the doorway at that plumb bob sitting on the felt, steady and true. And I understood that something in this family had been crooked for a very long time. I just had not hung the line yet. I called my subcontractor Monday morning. By Wednesday, the furnace was running again. $3,800 from my own checking account. The cold snap broke by Thursday. But something else broke with it. Something quieter. And it did not come back when the temperature climbed. If you have ever sat in a house you pay for, fixed a problem nobody helped you fix, and then watched your family throw thousands at someone else without blinking, you know what this channel was built for. This is Family Secret Tales. Stay with me. Here is what my family did not know I had been doing for them. And here is how I know. Because I went back and counted every dollar. Since January of 2021, I had been sending my parents $1,800 a month by direct bank transfer. My mother told me the mortgage was $1,700 and the extra $100 was for property tax escrow. She explained it once, on the phone, in the careful voice she uses when she is lying about numbers, but wants you to believe she is being generous with the truth. I did not question it. For 3 full years, I sent that money on the first of every month. $64,800. Not once did either of them thank me. Not once did Rylan bring it up at dinner. Not once did Corinne send a text on the second of the month saying the deposit had arrived. The money landed in their joint account and vanished the way water vanishes into a sponge, quietly, completely, as though it had always been part of the structure and not something poured in from the outside. In the summer of 2022, I renovated their kitchen. I drove to the house on a Friday evening after my own jobs closed for the week. The old kitchen had water damage behind the stove, soft drywall, a colony of mold spreading underneath the cabinet base. My mother had been cooking in that room for 6 years. I tore the cabinets out myself, replaced the drywall, ran new plumbing under the sink, installed custom cabinets I built in my own shop, laid a herringbone tile backsplash, hung new pendant lights, and finished with a granite countertop I cut, polished, and set with my own hands. My business partner Cope Alder ran the electrical on Saturday. By the following Sunday, the kitchen was done. If I had invoiced that job the way I invoice any client, materials plus labor, the total would have been $45,000. I did not write an invoice. They were my parents. The kitchen had mold. That was the whole calculation. 3 weeks later, I came for Sunday lunch. Their neighbor Debra was standing in the new kitchen, running her palm along the granite edge the way people do when they want to feel whether something is real. "Corinne, this is gorgeous. Who did the work?" My mother straightened a dish towel and smiled. "We found a wonderful contractor through the church directory. Very reasonable." She did not look at me. She did not say my name. I was sitting 6 feet away at the table I had shimmed and reinforced because the old legs wobbled so badly the salt shaker walked across the surface during dinner. Rylan cut his pot roast and said nothing. Deborah said, "You'll have to give me his number." Corinne promised she would. I ate my food. My hands, the ones that had hung those pendant lights 48 hours earlier, rested on a table I had fixed, in a room I had rebuilt, inside a lie my mother told without flinching. Then there was Gemma, 27, working on a master's degree in art therapy that had taken 4 years and showed no signs of ending. Her car insurance, $4,200 a year. Billed to my account for 3 years, $12,600 total. Her grad school deposit, $12,000 I wired in August of 2023, which she called a loan in the text where she asked for it, and which neither of us mentioned again, because we both understood it would never come back. And her car loan. I had co-signed it 2 years earlier because her credit score could not carry it alone. $14,400 remaining on the balance, and every month when the payment cleared at $320, the lender saw my name on the guarantee before it saw hers. My Uncle Boyd came to one of my job sites about 2 weeks after the furnace died. Boyd is Rylan's older brother, 64, a retired Finnish carpenter who taught me how to read grain and set a mortise joint before I was old enough to drive. He did not call ahead. He just showed up at the site in his truck, climbed out, and stood at the base of the ladder where I was framing a client's great room in 20-degree weather. My breath was coming in white clouds. My hands were red and cracked at the knuckles. Boyd watched me work for a long minute. He did not ask about the furnace. He already knew. "You're the beam, son," he said, "not the nail. Beams hold everything up. Nobody notices them. But pull one out and the whole structure comes down." He set a coffee on the sawhorse, looked at the framing I had done, and nodded once. Then he got in his truck and drove away. That was the specific moment. Not the furnace failing, not Rylan's voice on the phone. Boyd, standing in the cold with sawdust on his jacket, telling me in one sentence what I had been afraid to say to myself for 3 years. They had built their entire life on top of me and never once looked down to see what was holding it up. The flight incident came back to me in pieces after the furnace broke. But the sharpest piece was Thanksgiving. Gemma sat across the table from me, her chair angled toward Pierce Lowell, her boyfriend of 8 months. Pierce was 29, an insurance underwriter with good posture and a careful smile, the kind of man who holds doors and does not interrupt. Gemma was telling him about the Cabo trip, her fork resting on the edge of her plate, her voice bright with the particular confidence of someone who has never once worried about a bill. Mom got me this amazing first-class upgrade at the last minute. The seats reclined completely flat, like actual beds. I had a blanket and real silverware, and a little pouch with a sleep mask. I slept the entire way to Cabo. She laughed. Best flight of my life. Pierce nodded. Rylan leaned back in his chair and smiled like a man watching a horse he bet on cross the finish line. Corinne straightened the napkin in her lap and looked at Gemma the way she looked at every story Gemma told, with the satisfaction of a woman whose investment was paying dividends. Then Corinne turned to me and said, "Teague, isn't that wonderful? Your sister deserved a nice flight after all the stress she's been under with school. $6,500 is a lot for a flight," I said. Corinne's smile did not move. "Some things are worth the investment, sweetheart." She said it without looking away, without blinking, and the word investment landed on the table between us like a key to a door I was not yet ready to open. I did the math right there at the table. $6,500 for a 5-hour flight because a 27-year-old woman did not want to sit in economy. Nobody at that table blinked. Nobody said, "That was expensive." Nobody looked at me and wondered whether I might need something too. The furnace was still running. But the gap between what they gave her and what they would ever give me was already wider than any room in that house. I ate my turkey. I complimented the cranberry sauce. I helped clear the table. And I drove home that night with the furnace still running, still 60 days from cracking, and something in my chest shifted into a gear I did not know I had. The math started. And once it started, it did not stop. In early February, I called the SVAC company that held my quarterly service contract. The last visit had been September. The December visit never happened. I asked the service manager to pull the schedule and tell me why. Keys clicking on his end. A pause. "Mr. Harlow, we show a cancellation call on December 28th. The caller said you would handle the maintenance yourself." We marked it resolved. "Who called?" More clicking. "The notes say a man identifying himself as your father. Name on file as Ryland Harlow." "Did he say why?" "Notes just say the client's father called. Said his son preferred to handle it himself. Our guy asked if he wanted to reschedule, and the caller said no. Said you were, and I'm quoting the notes here, more than capable of dealing with it on your own. More than capable. The same man who never once lifted a tool in my direction, who never asked what I was building or how the business was going, had called my service company and used my competence as the reason to sabotage my safety net. I set the phone down on the counter very gently. My father had not simply refused to help when the furnace broke. He had canceled the service visit that would have caught the cracked exchanger before it became a failure. He reached into my life, removed the safety net, watched me fall, and then told me it was not his responsibility. I almost let it pass when he said those words on the phone. But the service log with his name on it, dated and time-stamped, made that impossible. You do not forgive sabotage. You document it. That same week, I pulled my own bank records going back 3 years. Every transfer to my parents' joint account, stamped and dated. Then I called the county recorder's office. Public records. Anyone can request them. I asked for the mortgage filing on my parents' address. The clerk read the entry and did not know she was pulling the pin on a grenade. Refinance completed March of 2020. New monthly payment, $780. $780. Not $1,700. $780 a month. Locked in 4 years ago. My parents had refinanced their mortgage to less than half of what Corinne told me they owed. And for 36 months, I had been sending $1,800 to cover a payment that was $780. The difference was $1,020 per month. Multiply that by $36,720. Skimmed, steadily, quietly, by my own mother, the woman who kept the financial books at her church. I tracked it. A savings account in Corinne's name opened at a different branch, with regular monthly deposits matching the difference, and a single withdrawal on November 18th of the prior year, $6,500, memo line labeled travel. My sister's first-class ticket to a wedding in Cabo, San Lucas, had been purchased with money my mother stole from me. The numbers were ugly and exact, but the math was not finished. In late February, I ran a credit check on myself. Contractors in North Carolina are required to maintain clean credit for state licensing. The report came back with a flag I had never seen: business liability, jointly held. A company called Gemma's Glow Candle Co. LLC, registered with the North Carolina Secretary of State's office, listed two members, Gemma Harlow and Teague Harlow. I had never heard of the company. I had never signed the filing. I had never agreed to any business arrangement with my sister. But there was my name, printed neatly on a form filed 7 months earlier, and the LLC had accumulated $28,000 in outstanding vendor debt. My name on the paper. My credit at risk. My liability. The signature on the filing was not mine. It was close. The kind of close that comes from watching someone sign birthday cards for 20 years and practicing the loop of the capital T. Corinne's handwriting. I recognized it the way a carpenter recognizes his own saw marks. I almost drove to their house that night with the filing in my hand and 36,000 reasons to break the door down. What stopped me was the document itself, sitting on my desk in the light of the task lamp. Forgery, fraud, identity theft. These were not family arguments you settle over pot roast. These were crimes. And crimes need evidence chains, not emotional confrontations that give the other side time to destroy records. I set the LLC filing beside the bank statements, the HVAC service log, and the county recorder printout. 4 documents on my desk, 4 separate crimes, and all of them traceable to the 2 people who told me my problems were not their responsibility. Then I called an attorney named Jessup, who had handled a lien dispute for me 2 years prior, and I told him what I had found. His response was 3 words: don't call them. I met Jessup the following Monday in his office on Patton Avenue. He spread my documents across his desk and read them the way I read a set of construction plans, slowly, systematically, checking each measurement against the next. After 20 minutes, he looked up and said, "The mortgage skimming is civil. The LLC forgery is criminal. You can pursue both, and if you want my advice, you pursue both." What does that look like? Demand letter for the 36,720. Fraud complaint filed with the county DA for the forged LLC signature. And I would recommend a lien on the property for the kitchen renovation, because once they receive the demand letter, the first thing they will try to do is sell the house. I thought about the house. The kitchen I rebuilt. The mold behind the stove I found and removed before it reached the framing. The plumbing I ran under the sink on a Saturday while Rylan watched a baseball game in the next room. I had saved that house. Now I was going to put a lien on it. Do it, I said. All of it. If this story is hitting a nerve because you have done the math on your own family and the numbers did not add up, stay right here. Family Secret Tales is where those numbers finally get spoken out loud. March 1st, I stopped the $1,800 monthly transfer. No phone call, no text, no goodbye note explaining the decision. The deposit that had arrived in my parents' joint account on the 1st of every month for 36 consecutive months simply did not appear. Corinne would see it when she checked the balance. She would know exactly what it meant. The same week, I filed the cosign withdrawal on Gemma's car loan. The lender processed it in 5 business days. Her monthly payment, which had been $320 with my credit anchoring the rate, adjusted to $890 without me. She would find out when the April statement arrived. I also pulled my name from her auto insurance policy. The new premium without my clean driving record bundling the discount would jump by roughly 40%. These were not threats. These were withdrawals. I was pulling the beam out and letting them feel the structure shift. And then I started building. The lot was 40 minutes west of Asheville. 2 acres of old-growth hardwood and mountain laurel on a south-facing slope with a view of the Blue Ridge that made the back of my throat ache in a way that had nothing to do with grief. I had bought the land 2 years earlier for the timber access and never touched it. Now I had a purpose. I designed the cabin myself. Post and beam. 1,200 square feet. A covered deck running the full southern wall. Cedar siding that I milled from trees I felled on the property with a portable sawmill. The framing started on the first Saturday in March. Cope ran the electrical. My crew came on weekends for material cost and pizza. I hung Grandpa Emmett's plumb bob from the first wall frame, watched the brass weight settle against the string, and checked if the wall was true. It was. Everything I built from that point on would be true, because I was done building on top of other people's crooked foundations. Some Saturdays I worked alone. Just me and the ridge and the sound of a nail gun echoing off the slope. On those days I would stop in the late afternoon, sit on an unfinished joist, and look at the view I was building toward. I almost called my father on one of those afternoons. The light was doing something golden across the hardwoods, and for half a second I imagined Ryland standing at the edge of the deck that did not yet exist, looking at the mountains, saying something like, "You did this, son," but the image dissolved the way images do when they are built on a version of a person who does not exist. Ryland had never said anything like that. He never would. The plumb bob hanging from the frame post swung gently in the wind, and I picked up my nail gun and went back to work. Total cost, $165,000. Materials at my cost, crew at weekend rates, my own labor free. Every board, every beam joint, every sheet of roofing felt came from my hands or from people I trusted. Nobody in my family offered $1. Nobody called to ask what I was building. Nobody cared until they saw it. In April, Corinne called. Her voice was careful, the same voice she used when she lied about the mortgage number. "Teague, the March payment didn't come through. Is there something wrong with your bank account?" I let it ring to voicemail. Listened to it once, deleted it. She called again 2 days later. This time she left a longer message. "Teague, I don't know what is going on, but your father and I are counting on that payment. We have bills. Call me back." Her voice had an edge I recognized. Not worry. Inconvenience, the sound a person makes when a machine they depend on stops working and they cannot find the manual. Ryland did not call. He texted. One line. "Handle your obligations, Teague." I read it in my truck at a job site, sitting in the cab with my lunch on the dash, and I almost laughed. Handle your obligations. From the man who canceled my SHVAC service call. From the man who let his wife forge my signature on a business filing. From the man who watched me renovate his kitchen and then pretended a stranger did the work. I saved the text, added it to the file. Gemma texted 4 days later, "Mom says you stopped helping with the house payment? That's really selfish, Teague. They depend on that money." I took a screenshot, saved it to the evidence folder. Selfish, the word glowed on my screen like a coal that did not know it was sitting on a pile of receipts, totaling $134,000. By May 4th, the cabin was substantially complete. The deck was stained. The kitchen was plumbed. The bedroom window framed the ridge at exactly the angle I had drawn on the plans 9 weeks earlier. I hung the plumb bob on a finish nail beside the front door. It hung perfectly vertical, perfectly still, brass catching the light. Then I picked up my phone and called my parents. "Come see the place," I said. My voice was easy, warm even. Saturday the 11th. I want the whole family to see it. Bring Gemma. Bring Pierce. Corinne sounded relieved. "Of course, sweetheart. We would love that." I could hear Ryland in the background. "Tell him we'll bring potato salad." As though the last 2 months of silence had been a weather pattern that had simply passed. As though the missing $1,800 a month was a billing error that would sort itself out. My father's ability to walk past a problem and call it solved has always been his most dangerous skill. I also called Boyd. I called Cope. I gave everyone the address and told them noon. The table was set. The only question was whether anyone would look down and see what was under the plates. They arrived separately. Boyd first, 40 minutes early, in his work truck with the dented tailgate. He walked the property without speaking. He touched the beam joints the way a man touches something he taught someone else to build, and then sees it done better than he imagined. He ran his hand along the deck railing and turned to me with his eyes shining, and said, "Emmett would have stood right here." That was all he said. That was enough. Cope arrived next, brought a box of coffee for everyone, set up chairs on the deck. Then Pierce and Gemma in Pierce's silver SUV. Then Ryland and Corinne in the sedan. Ryland walked through the cabin the way he walked through everything I built. He looked at the window frames I had hand-planed, ran his eyes across the post and beam joints that Boyd had touched with reverence, and said nothing. Corinne opened cabinets and closed them. Gemma took a photo on her phone. Pierce stopped at the main beam and looked up. "This is real post and beam construction. You did this yourself?" Before I could answer, Ryland cut in. "It's a hobby. He likes building things." Boyd, standing by the deck railing, said nothing, but his coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth, and his eyes moved to Ryland and stayed there. On the deck, everyone settled into chairs. The Blue Ridge spread out to the south in layers of blue and green, the kind of view that costs a lifetime to earn if you earn it with your own hands. Coffee was poured. Gemma crossed her legs, looked at the mountains, and turned to Pierce. "Could you imagine coming up here on weekends, like a little getaway?" Pierce looked at the beam joints above the deck overhang. "You did all of this yourself, Teague?" "Every board. Every joint." "That's impressive. This is real craftsmanship." Ryland shifted in his chair. "He's always liked working with his hands." Gemma waved a hand. "This is cute. Kind of rustic. Can Pierce and I stay here this weekend? We could come up Friday night. It would be like a retreat. We'll talk about that in a minute. Seriously, Teague, it would be so fun. I could bring wine." "Before we plan weekends," I said, "I need to talk about money." I set a manila folder on the outdoor table between the coffee cups and the sugar bowl. Opened the cover. The first page was the full bank transfer record. Every deposit, every date, every stamp. $1,800 a month. 36 months. $64,800. Ryland looked at the page and then at me. "What is this?" "Put that away. This is not the time or place for whatever you're doing. You told me my problems weren't your responsibility, Dad. Let me show you what your responsibility actually looked like." I turned to the second page. County recorder filing. Mortgage refinance, March 2020. New monthly payment, $780. Corinne's hand drifted to her collar and stayed there, fingers working the fabric. Third page. Savings account statement under her name. Monthly deposits matching the $1,020 difference. Running total $36,720. A withdrawal on November 18th for $6,500 labeled travel. "That is Gemma's first-class ticket to Cabo," I said. "Paid for with money you skimmed from your own son for 3 years. Fourth page. Gemma's Glow Candle Co. LLC filing. My name printed as co-member. A signature I did not write. $28,000 in vendor debt. "That is forgery," I said. "That is fraud." Corinne opened her mouth. I looked directly at her. "Don't." She closed it. Ryland's chair scraped the deck boards as he stood. He looked at Boyd, who was still holding his coffee cup with both hands. He looked at Cope, whose jaw had gone tight enough to show the muscle jumping at the hinge. He looked at Pierce, who had pulled his hand away from Gemma's knee. Then he looked at me, and he said the thing he had been sharpening for 33 years. "You think pouring a foundation makes you someone, Teague? Gemma has a master's degree. You have dirt under your fingernails and a shack in the woods you are parading around like it is the Taj Mahal. I have been telling your mother for years. You turned out exactly like your grandfather. Good with your hands, useless at everything else. And that is why you are 33 years old, alone, and standing on a porch begging your family to notice a pile of lumber. The deck went still. A jay called somewhere in the trees below the ridge, and it sounded louder than it should have, because nobody on that porch was breathing. Uncle Boyd set his coffee on the railing slowly, deliberately, the way you set something down when you want your hands free. Cope's arms crossed. Pierce looked at Gemma the way you look at someone when you are seeing their family for the first time and you understand, suddenly, completely, what they come from. I stood. My voice was level. I did not raise it. I have never raised it. You canceled my vac service call on December 28th, Dad. The company has your name in the log time-stamped, and I have a copy. You caused a $3,800 failure and then told me my problems were not your responsibility. Mom, you collected $1,800 a month from me for 3 years while the mortgage was $780. You skimmed $36,720 into a savings account only you could access and used $6,500 of it to buy Gemma a first-class ticket she did not need. Gemma, I co-signed your car. I paid your insurance for 3 years at $4,200 a year. I loaned you $12,000 for grad school that you never returned. And someone forged my signature on an LLC filing that put $28,000 of debt on my credit. That is identity theft. That is fraud. That is a felony in the state of North Carolina. My attorney filed a complaint with the county district attorney's office on Monday. The demand letter for full restitution will be served this week. The cosign on your car was withdrawn in March. Your insurance is your own. And every dollar I have sent this family for the last 3 years is over. Permanently, Gemma stared at the LLC filing. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Pierce shifted his chair 6 inches to the left. The distance was small, but the message was architectural. I was not finished. The brutal line was still in the air. Every word of it. You called this a shack, Dad, a pile of lumber. This pile of lumber cost $165,000, and I built it with my own crew, on my own land, with my own money. The kitchen you eat dinner in every night, the one you told your neighbor was done by some contractor from the church, I built that too. $45,000 in materials and labor. Free. The dirt under my nails paid your mortgage for 3 years. The man you called useless has 6 employees, a company that cleared $380,000 last year, and a client list booked through October. And the man who turned out like his grandfather? I looked at the plumb bob hanging from the nail beside the front door. Brass, steady, catching the afternoon sun. Grandpa Emmett was the only honest person in this family. I will take that comparison every single day of my life. Ryland's hands went to the edge of the table. His knuckles whitened, and then his fingers opened as though the wood had scalded him. His jaw worked sideways once, twice, a third time, but the sound that came out was half a word that collapsed before it could stand. He looked at the folder, then at Boyd, then back at me. His left knee buckled slightly, just enough to make his weight shift to his right foot, and he gripped the back of his chair like a man on a boat that has started to list. The color drained from his face slowly, from the forehead down, and his breathing went shallow and visible, chest barely moving, mouth slightly open. I waited until his eyes came back to mine. Then I said it. You refinanced in 2020. The mortgage is $780. You took $36,000 from your own son and called it responsibility. 24 words. Flat, no heat. The room heard every one of them. He tried to recover. We can work this out, Teague. Just sit down. Let's sit down and talk about this like a family. We are not a family that talks. We are a family where one person pays and everyone else pretends. You are going to destroy your own mother over money? Ryland's voice climbed. After everything she has done for this family, she destroyed her own son for $36,000. The money was mine. The forgery was hers. And everything she did for this family, she did with my money. Gemma's voice cracked from the far end of the table. Teague, I didn't know about the LLC. Mom told me you agreed to it. She said you wanted to help. She forged my signature, Gemma, if you didn't know. Then you need to ask her what else she told you that wasn't true. Rylan straightened and gripped the chair back. Give me 6 months. I will pay it back. All of it. Every cent. Just call off the attorney. You had 36 months. You used them to steal. His chin lifted. You owe us respect, Teague. We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. And for the last 3 years, I put a roof over yours. The difference is I have the receipts. Corinne's voice came in low, shaking Teague. Please, the money was supposed to be for emergencies. I was saving it for the family. For all of us. For all of us. I let the words sit. The memo line said travel. The ticket said first class. The LLC said my name. Which part of that was for me? She had no answer. So she found a different exit. Corinne pressed both hands to her chest. Her eyes went wide, and her breath caught in a theatrical stutter. I cannot breathe. This is too much. Teague, you are going to give me a heart attack right here on this porch. Is that what you want? Nobody moved. Boyd stayed in his chair with his hands on his knees, eyes on the ridge. Cope looked at the mountains. Pierce studied the grain of the deck boards beneath his shoes. The silence held for 10 full seconds. Nobody reached for a phone. Nobody asked if she was okay. Because everyone on that deck, every single person, knew she was fine. The hand dropped, the breathing normalized. The performance ended the way all her performances ended, with a room that had stopped applauding. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out the plumb bob. The brass was warm from sitting against my body all morning. I set it on the table between my father and me. It sat there heavy and still, the way Grandpa Emmett's hands used to rest on a finished joint. True and vertical and honest. Telling you what is crooked by simply being straight. This is the last dollar, I said. The last favor. The last phone call. The last time any of you will stand on something I built and tell me it is not enough. My number stays the same. My answer will not change. We are done. Gemma's voice came out thin. Can we at least talk about this inside? Not my responsibility. The words landed flat and heavy, the same words Rylan had said to me in January, returned without heat, without volume, without any emotion at all, except the quiet certainty of a man who has checked the line and found everything around him crooked except himself. Pierce stood first. He did not look at Gemma. He walked across the deck and down the gravel path to his SUV, started the engine, and pulled down the mountain road without a word. Boyd rose next, put his hand on my shoulder for 3 seconds, squeezed once, and walked to his truck. Cope collected the coffee cups and carried them inside. Rylan, Corinne, and Gemma sat on the deck of a cabin they would never sleep in, surrounded by mountains they could not afford, on furniture built by the hands they had called dirty. I went inside. I closed the door. The plumb bob stayed on the table. 3 weeks later, the repo notice arrived at Gemma's apartment. Without my cosign, her car payment had jumped to $890. She missed the first month. She missed the second. The tow company arrived on a Tuesday morning at 7:15. Gemma watched from her second-floor window in a bathrobe as the flatbed driver hooked the front axle, winched the car onto the ramp, and drove away with 2 years of payments sitting on the bed of a truck that did not care about her master's degree. She called me twice that afternoon, once at noon and once at 4. I did not answer either call. She left one voicemail that started angry and ended quiet. Teague, this is insane. You can't just do this to me. I need that car for school. Please call me back. The word please arrived 30 seconds too late and about $12,000 short. Pierce had not returned Gemma's calls since the cabin. His Instagram, which had featured 3 photos of the two of them, was scrubbed clean by the following Wednesday. Gemma's relationship status was the least of what she lost on that deck. But it was the part she noticed first. The cease and desist from my attorney arrived the same week, demanding removal of my name from the LC filing within 14 days, or face a civil fraud lawsuit for the full $28,000 in vendor debt plus damages. Gemma forwarded it to Corinne with a single text. What do I do? Corinne did not respond for 2 days. Ryland and Corinne discovered that their actual mortgage of $780 was manageable. What was not manageable was the property tax they had been ignoring for 2 years, the water heater they could not pay to replace, and the attorney's demand letter that arrived by certified mail on a Thursday. $36,720 in restitution, plus formal notice of the fraud complaint forwarded to the county DA, plus a lien filing against their property for the $45,000 kitchen renovation that had never been invoiced until now. Corinne signed for the envelope at the front door in her church blouse. She read the first page on the porch steps and sat down. The county district attorney's office opened a fraud investigation file on the forged LLC. An investigator left a voicemail on Corinne's phone requesting a formal interview at the county offices. The voicemail was 43 seconds long. Corinne played it twice and has not returned the call. The $28,000 in vendor debt was flagged for review. 3 of the vendors have filed their own collection actions. If charges proceed, the forgery carries a potential felony classification in North Carolina, with a maximum sentence that Corinne has probably not looked up, but that Jessup, my attorney, quoted to me from memory. At church the following Sunday, Corinne's bookkeeping group asked her about the kitchen. The information had traveled the way it always does in small congregations, from Cope's wife to their neighbor to the choir director's sister-in-law, and from there into the fellowship hall like smoke under a door. Corinne had told those women for 2 years that a wonderful contractor from the church directory had done the renovation. She had shown photos, she had accepted compliments, she had given a fake contractor's name when asked for a referral. Now they knew the contractor was her son, the same son whose signature she had forged on a business filing, the same son whose money had paid for a first-class ticket she passed off as generosity. 2 women at the potluck moved to the far end of the table when Corinne sat down. The choir director, who had once asked for the contractor's phone number and been given a name that did not exist, studied her hymn book and did not look up. A third woman, the one who organized the annual charity bake sale and who had trusted Corinne with the books for 6 years, set her plate down, picked it back up, and moved to a different room without explanation. The bookkeeping role was reassigned by Wednesday. Corinne left the service before the closing prayer and has not returned. The pew, where she sat for 11 years, stays empty on Sunday mornings, and nobody moves to fill it. Boyd told me what happened on a Thursday evening in June. He had stopped by to drop off a casserole his wife made. He said Ryland was standing in the kitchen I built. The pendant light was humming overhead, the same fixture I had wired while Ryland watched a baseball game in the next room. The $45,000 invoice was still taped to the refrigerator where I had stuck it. Boyd said Ryland's phone was sitting on the granite countertop I had installed with Cope holding the other end. My number was on the screen. Boyd said Ryland looked at it for a long time and did not press the call button. In the next room, Corinne sat with her church ledger open and a calculator beside it. Both of them sitting inside a room I built, doing arithmetic they should have done 3 years ago. Ryland was in a kitchen he did not build, staring at an invoice he could not pay, holding a phone he could not bring himself to use. Boyd told me that much. 40 minutes west, I sat on my cabin deck with coffee cooling on the rail and Grandpa Emmett's plumb bob hanging from the finish nail beside the front door, brass turning slowly in the morning air, perfectly vertical, perfectly still. Construction plans for a client's new 4-bedroom were spread across the outdoor table. The corners weighted with river stones I had gathered from the creek below the property. My phone lay face down beside the plans. 3 missed calls from Corinne since Sunday, all ignored. The Blue Ridge was going copper at the edges the way it does when spring decides to let summer in, and the morning smelled like cedar and coffee and the particular quiet that belongs to a place you built with your own hands for no one's approval but your own. The plumb bob turned once more in the breeze, then settled. Everything it touched was true. I picked up my pencil and went back to the plans. Thank you for being here today. If this story reminded you that knowing your worth is not the same as waiting for someone else to confirm it, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I will see you in the next one.